Tom, just before we went to news, I said, I haven't talked about this. I saw this on the news, and I wanted to ask you for your take. It's not that long ago that Justin Trudeau got in a bit of hot water, as we remember, when he pointed a finger at India over some kind of a hit to some Sikh citizen here. And he was rebuked, I think, at the time because he didn't show up with much proof. And then just yesterday, we have the U.S. accusing India of trying to do the same thing in the U.S. So what's going on here?
Over 2 months ago, Mr. Trudeau stood in the House first day back for Parliament and said that there was credible indications that India was involved in killing a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. So it was a complete flurry of activity, turmoil. Aaron and Natasha, I wound up doing, thanks to you guys, because of course everybody listens to CJAD 800 in India, I wound up getting calls and doing a bunch of interviews on Indian television, believe it or not.
No kidding.
Because this is how this thing, grew like Topsy. So everybody was just saying, well, you've got to show the evidence. Well, Trudeau, first of all, I'll start off by saying he was pitch perfect on this, okay? You can just imagine the temptation to say, I told you so. And he avoided that temptation. He just very statesman-like said, look, we've been calling upon India to take this seriously. The Americans are doing the same thing now, and we're going to have to deal with this. The Americans have actually accused someone of a plot. They didn't get to the final, situation like we did here in Canada with the actual killing of someone. But they know that the Indian government's involved. The Americans are talking about it quite openly. They are close partners with Canada on these security and intelligence matters. And I think that Trudeau's been completely vindicated by this. And now, of course, all we have to do is have Canada do the same sort of thing as the Americans, is to proceed with an arrest.
I just wonder, this obviously we look at things like this, and you remember the kind of look he got when he was in India, and this story was then brewing, and he just got a glance from the Indian Prime Minister at the time.
Lack of support from international leaders.
Yeah, and they're big trade partners both for the U.S. and Canada, and I wonder, does this get left on the table? Like, where does it go from something like this?
What a great question, and exactly right, because the Americans are courting India fiercely, because it is now the most populous country on earth. It's got a booming economy. It's really growing in terms of education and technology and so forth. All the rolling stock for the REM was made in India. So they really are a burgeoning economy. And the Americans want to be close to them because of the ascendancy of China. They just think it's important for them geopolitically. Canada has a whole Indo-Pacific strategy. Well, you can't have an Indo-Pacific strategy without India. So Trudeau, I think that's another reason why Trudeau was so careful, because he doesn't want to say, okay, this has soured our relationship for long term. But all of the posturing and the huffing and puffing that we got from India saying, oh, boy, we're so upset with you, we're going to throw it about, we're going to start telling your people they no longer have diplomatic immunity. You remember that one? And we're not going to be issuing visas anymore. And they've got egg on their face, and, they're proud. They're not going to admit that they were wrong, but they were wrong. And if they were indeed, if it was a government plan, and if there's every appearance that it was, then they've got to get to the bottom of it and find out who in the government was behind it.
Totally agreed. So let's talk about what's going on with the strikes and the unions and Sonia LaBelle. There were meetings yesterday, and we had heard at the time that they were looking encouraging, that something might come of it, and nothing came of it, Tom. So where are we at now, and why isn't there a greater sense of urgency here?
I still believe that meeting yesterday was very important.
Okay.
The most important thing of that meeting was they agreed to shut up and not to start negotiating on the public square. The teachers union that has declared itself on permanent unlimited strike, they seem to be looking for a way to start walking it back, and they've been getting sufficient positive signals that they think that they might be able to talk to their members about that. So I think all of this is going in the right direction. And it's a very complicated thing because you're trying to deal with so many different collective agreements and so many different requirements. The government hasn't been very clear about what they want. They wasted a lot of time. And I think that most of the responsibility for the current impasse is still squarely on the shoulders of the employer side, on the government side. But the unions have strong strike mandates. They also know that there's going to be a limit to their public support. The public has been supporting the teachers and the nurses and their unions super strongly, but there's a finite limit to that. The minute you have a family member or a friend who gets a treatment postponed or canceled, you're going to say, okay, that's enough of that. And, kids have been through years of pandemic. There's calculations that many kids have actually missed half of their class time in the past few years. That can't continue. Otherwise, we're going to have a generation of kids just not prepared for CJAD in university.
Tell me about it.
Thanks for making her day worse, Tom. Let me ask you this, though, with respect to kids in schools. Anything new on this tuition hike, a university hike? I know we're saying the government will probably say something next week. Have you heard anything?
We got some leaks yesterday that they were talking about reducing the cut by 1/3, but that would still put the tuition for Canadian students from other provinces way above what they pay in their home provinces. So the basic flaw, and it was just dumb, lousy staff work by the people around Pascal Derry, because ministers are not supposed to be sitting down and looking this up themselves. They're supposed to be paying, very competent professionals to put together their papers for them. And Pascal Derry's numbers were completely wrong. They're just literally completely wrong. So I'll give you one specific example. They wanted to boost the tuition for undergraduate programs to $17,000. Whether you're in a science faculty or an arts faculty, the two best universities in Canada, along with McGill, the three tops, so the only three in the top 50 worldwide, are University of British Columbia and University of Toronto. Their tuition is less than half of that $17,000. It's more in the $6,500 range. So I don't know, who is going to get fired in Pascal Derry's staff. But she's the one who's carrying the weight of having said things that made no sense. Now Legault's stuck with it. Now he's trying to walk it back, and they're trying to show that they're going to get something in return. Because, of course, you remember the universities were putting something on the table. They're saying, well, we're going to try to encourage, we'll get as many as 40% of the folks who come through to learn some French and better integrate. That would be in everybody's favor. That's a really great idea. Now Legault's saying, well, that's not enough. I want a tougher rule. Because Legault has painted himself into a corner. Because the minute he moves on this, it was already starting with Pascal Béribé of the Parti Québécois. The minute he moves on this, and he has to because he's getting clobbered again today, he got beaten up, by senior employers groups telling him, look, this makes no sense. So he's got to back off, but he's got to do it saving face for himself, because otherwise the PQ is just going to eat his lunch even more.
I guess the other thing we can touch on today, this is a story from yesterday, that $100 million that the federal government announced Google would be coughing up now to Canadian news organizations. I don't know if you caught this today, Tom, already in Quebec City. I guess these are a couple of CAC entities. I'm not entirely sure. The idea being that, none of this money better be going to CBC or to Radio-Canada. What do you think?
I completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, they get billions of dollars of taxpayers' money to begin with.
They do.
Second of all, it's not an even playing field because they've been encroaching, for example, using websites, to create news and to generate news, and it's totally unfair competition. And I'll add something that I've had a chance to tell you before, and it's not something that I say lightly or I take lightly, but about the only thing I agree on with Pierre Poilievre is when he says, look, CBC is strongly tilted in favor of the Liberal Party, and I lived that up close and personal. So we're going to somehow take the money from Google, give it to the state television network and the state radio network, English and French, because it's government-owned. And I'm telling you that there is a parti pris. They're like the Tower of Pisa. They always lean towards the Liberals. They're going to take that money that is meant to help local newspapers and the like, think the Gazette, to survive in a market where there are fewer and fewer ads, and they're going to give it to CBC Radio-Canada that's already getting billions. Give me a break. No, not one penny for CBC Radio-Canada, not 1 cent.
That was very convincing,
Yes,
Tom.
I think it was. Although I will tell you, I watched The National last night, and I think at one point when they were talking about the story, and someone from the CBC said, and of course we fully expect to get our money as well. Yeah,
well, of course they were saying that again today. But you know what? The panel show that I do in the afternoon on TVA, LCN, okay? Yep. It has a larger audience, not a larger audience proportionally to population. It has a larger audience than the CBC National News across the country.
Okay.
And that's just in the Quebec market. So, for the popularity of CBC News, we'll have to come back another time.
Right. Well, and we know they had major job cuts at TVA, so they're hurting. That money would help.
Oh, yeah. Like 547, but that was the second wave of cuts.
Well,
so
we shall
that's
see.
The type of place, like places like CTV Montreal and CJAD 800 with a great newsroom in both places that should be getting that money. Not CBC.
Just the way I wrote it. Thank you so much, Tom.